If you're also wondering how to make money as a musician, these are a bunch of ways that have worked for me. Before we get started though, it's important to realize that being a musician is not really finding one job that pays you a salary. It's more about stringing a bunch of different jobs together in order to create that income. It's very rare to find a performing, teaching, or music-related job that will pay you enough to live off of. Another important thing to consider is the value that each of these jobs might provide for you. Things I like to keep in mind are the money involved, the people involved, and the experience that you might gain from accepting a job. Often you won't be able to get all three of those, but if you can get 2 out of the 3, that's probably a job or opportunity worth taking. One of the most obvious places to start for music is teaching, so let's start there. Personally, I would encourage everyone to at least try teaching. It is one of the most stable jobs you can have as a musician, and it really can help support you as you work towards other goals and ambitions you may have. So here are some ways that you can earn money teaching. Teaching solo or group lessons at a music school can provide you with stability, but often at the expense of earning potential. However, it is a great way to meet other musicians, potential clients, and gain experience. Teaching solo or group lessons privately is far more lucrative, but it requires a lot more work. You need to market yourself, travel to students, or have a place where you can teach them. You're responsible for scheduling, collecting money, and resolving any conflicts that may arise. In my opinion, it's far superior to working at a school if you can manage it. Teaching lessons virtually, though, has been my favorite experience by far. You can work from home, you can fit way more students into your day, and there's no traveling. Some students don't do well in this kind of environment, but in my experience, it's really only the ultra young students that don't. The only type of lesson that I found to be more difficult was singing lessons. Unless you have a really high-end streaming setup, it's pretty much impossible to accompany your students. I've had a bunch of students over the years that wanted to learn music theory or business, and that's definitely a great way to earn some money, but it does require a lot of talking. It's pretty much exclusively talking throughout the lesson as there's no playing, so that's something to consider when you stack it throughout your day. Songwriting and music production lessons are also something that's viable, but they require a ton of talking as well. By the way, music theory and songwriting, all of those lessons I've been able to do virtually. Making lessons or explaining topics for YouTube or social media are great ways to potentially earn money, but you could also release those same videos through a subscribing platform such as Patreon or as add-ons to your students' lessons. A lot of times lessons aren't enough time to cover certain topics. If a student wants to explore something more, you could create a video for them going into a lot more detail, and they can always refer back to that video if they want to learn more about that topic or go over something again. You could charge per video or per concept or however you want to do it. Although this is more performance related, accompanying is something that you're going to have to do probably pretty often if you have students. Anything that occurs during the lesson I would never charge for, but if you have to travel somewhere or do anything outside of the standard lesson time, that's something you can charge for, and it is definitely a way to make extra money. Accompanying can also be for dance classes, auditions, or even live performances and social media collaborations. Transcribing is another teaching adjacent skill. Transcribing in lessons is a skill you really need to have, but again, if the transcription occurs outside of lessons, such as a student wants you to prepare something for their lesson for next week, that's something you should probably charge for. Lastly, teaching music at a high school or college level often requires a degree of some sort, or at least a certification, but not always, and especially at colleges, sometimes real-world experience can trump that and get you a job. My YouTube channel has gotten me work at a bunch of different schools doing video and audio stuff. Another point that you have to keep in mind when teaching is that the more instruments you play, the more valuable you are and the higher your ability to make and earn money. When I was teaching full-time, I taught vocals, guitar, bass, piano, and even drums. You don't have to be at a professional level to teach instruments that aren't your main instrument, but you should always be honest with your students, and if you feel like your student is eclipsing your ability on that instrument, or for any other reason you're not capable of teaching the lesson, you should pass them on to a more qualified teacher. Performance is another obvious way that musicians make money. Here are a bunch of different ways that I've earned money performing in the past. Playing in bars and restaurants is a good way. They're typically cover gigs and the pay is usually low, but they're typically the most accessible and prevalent gig you can find out there as a working musician. If you're in school or just starting, these will probably make up a bulk of your performance opportunities. Playing assisted living or retirement homes is another viable option. These are usually a very different style of gig and typically about an hour or so. The money is a bit better than bars and restaurants on average, but it is an entirely different type of gig. And depending on your market, it can be really, really lucrative. Performing original music gigs as a sideman is another good way to earn money, although good is probably not the right word, as they're typically very low paying. But if you're playing with good musicians and the music is good, it's definitely a worthwhile experience. Playing street fairs or public festival types of events are usually more headaches and lower pay than bars and restaurants on average. But the benefit is that they expose you to a wider group of people and a rotating group of people. Often you need to know someone to get into these types of gigs, but sometimes just reaching out via email to the organizations in charge is enough to get your foot in the door. The more gigs and events you do, the more people will see you play and hopefully like you enough to hire you. You can get a lot of private parties and events this way, and it's a really good opportunity to earn more money. The benefit is that the pay is higher because you set your own rates. However, you're in charge of all the responsibilities and logistics of the gig, so it's a lot more work. Also, pro tip, don't refer to people's events as gigs. Just to be safe, always call it an event or whatever the actual thing is, if it's a wedding or a birthday party. Playing for proposals is definitely an interesting one. I've done it a few times and it's great to be a part of that special moment, but there's a lot of things you don't think about that are involved. The main thing being that people don't understand the logistics that go into an event like that, and so they really don't want to pay you a lot. The reality is that you'll have to drive to and from the location, wherever that is, sometimes probably far from your house. You'll also have to be there a significant amount of time before they are. And then you'll have to learn any music that they want you to learn for this proposal. The whole time expecting you to do this for like $100. So there are people that understand how much an event like this really should cost, but you have to be prepared for people to lowball you on things like this. Places of worship can be very stable and a great way to earn money. In my experience, most places of worship don't even care if you are the religion that they are. They're just looking for someone who can do the job well. The job being leading them in song and not necessarily trying to do a show-stealing performance. Similarly, playing funerals, memorial services, and events like that kind of go hand in hand with the last one. I will admit this one took me a while to get used to at first and definitely felt weird to charge money for. However, you are providing a service and you're helping people in a time of grief. I think these kinds of jobs are really important and not necessarily something you would think of that a musician does. Wedding ceremonies and cocktail hours are really kind of the most lucrative gig you can get as a musician. They require very little time commitment in comparison to other events, and they're usually the most amount of money. The caveat is that you have to be a lot more prepared, polished, and professional than other events that I've listed so far. If you can get into a wedding band that currently exists, that might be one of the most solid and reputable and consistent jobs that you can get as a musician. The rates for this can vary, but most wedding gigs are at least $500, ranging to over $1,000. You can build one from the ground up, but it takes a lot of work, and you're going to be competing with other wedding bands and entertainment agencies that have years and decades of experience. It can be done, but it's really tricky. Another downside of this is that you'll often also have to play cocktails and ceremonies when you're doing the receptions for these wedding bands, but at a much reduced rate than you would if you were just doing it and booking it on your own. Playing with a touring band is another way you can earn money. It's probably one of the more interesting and unique ones on here. It's not something I've personally done, but I do know a lot of musicians that have toured with other bands. Playing for pit bands can be a really good experience. You'll have to learn and cram a bunch of material and play with people of varying degrees of talent depending on how lucrative the gig is. I know people that do Broadway gigs, I know people that do High School Musical gigs, but all of the pit band gigs are definitely worth it musically if you can get in. I will tell you, one of the worst offers I've ever received for a gig at all was a pit gig for $150 total, and that included 3 rehearsals and 3 show dates, weekend dates, Fridays and Saturday. So there is money in that if you can find it, but it's usually very hard to, and you often have to know people or know someone that's leaving in order to get one of those good roles. Performing for social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, these videos are often the ones that are most overlooked by working musicians. Not everyone needs to upload 4 times a day, but it's important to have a body of work that you can show people. People that are willing to hire you, people that you want to impress. You need to have some videos online that represent who you are as an artist. This is probably one of the things that has led me to being hired the most, is people seeing my videos on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. Lastly, session work can be pretty lucrative, but it's also kind of sporadic if you're not well connected. It can be hard to break into that circle, but it is definitely something you can do. And that's kind of a good segue into talking about production and songwriting work. So producing or recording music for someone doesn't necessarily have to be at a professional level in order to get work. Helping someone new to recording record demos, or recording parts for students, or even recording things for your bands, those are all things that you can kind of charge for. Sometimes payment is not always an option, but it's definitely a worthwhile experience to do that work if it's with good friends, or it will lead to a better experience down the road. Songwriting is another way to earn money, and again, not necessarily in the professional way. You don't have to work for a label, you don't have to necessarily do all the sync placements that are huge on YouTube and social media. Some people just need songs written for them, whether that's as a hobby. Oh, what do we got here? There are people that are willing to pay others to do the creative work for them and to write those songs. Maybe there's even people out there that just want to be your patron and support your work. Mixing and mastering can also be a very viable career, right, Rory? It can also be a side hustle or even just a hobby. People need music mixed and mastered, and budgets are often low, so there's potential for a lot of work out there. Sync can be very lucrative, and there's a lot of opportunities out there, but that's not something I have a ton of experience with. Streaming is another way to earn money, but probably not for a long time down the road. Creating a body of original music and covers, if that's what you want to do, is definitely important, and it can lead to monetization one day. Likewise, social media, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, takes a big investment of time before you really get rolling and start earning any kind of money. But the potential is definitely there. Lastly, marketing, ads, or working with companies. These are things that can provide you as another income source with your work. I've been approached in the past from a bunch of different companies to do things like this, and sometimes it leads to free gear, sometimes it leads to actual payment, and sometimes it just leads to headaches. But I know a lot of friends that have brought in real money this way. And this kind of leads me to the main point of this video. It's who you know in music. Above all else, the most important thing that you can do in music is meet other musicians that have similar mindsets and goals to you. You can definitely develop crazy amounts of skill hitting the shed and progress really far on your own, but eventually there's a limit. Knowing other musicians or people that hire musicians is beyond vital to your success in music. Talent and hard work prepare you for opportunities, but knowing people is what get those opportunities to your door in the first place. So what does this mean? If you need work as a musician, or if you're just starting out, what this means is that you really should be attending every jam session you can, every opportunity you can to play with other people. Join every ensemble that you're allowed to join in school, even if you hate the music that they play. Just meet other musicians and play with them. If you have zero work, or you're just looking to get your foot in the door in the music industry, meeting and playing with anyone you possibly can should be your first step. You should definitely be saying yes to every opportunity you're offered at the start. For years, I said yes to everything, and I got a lot of bad gigs. I worked crazy hours for no pay, and I had some really ridiculous experiences. But doing all of that helped because it led me to more people, more musicians, and more opportunities. Music takes a ton of hard work, and unfortunately, talent is not really enough to have a successful career. It is definitely possible though, and hopefully by taking some of these ideas, you can put them into action for your own life and plan. And hopefully you can make a living doing music too.